arrived at Lego in January 2010. Lego had a strong tradition for working with their consumers, getting very close to their consumers, and so a lot of this was something I needed to work with. My mandate was to come in and work with our 13 plus consumers and figure out how we could do things, make business models, and make programs that could create value. So the first thing I did was to try and understand what these people were doing. I took a lot of surveys, a lot of conversations. I traveled around the world, talked with them, and then I found out there's basically two things we could do initially. One thing was that these consumers were very, very creative. They knew our product very well. They could do amazing things with our product. So the first thing I did was to create a way for them to be able to participate in what we do when we create Lego products. That program is currently called Lego Ideas. It is a website where if you have a good idea, then you can upload it there. If you get 10,000 votes, then we might produce it and you get 1% of net sales. The interesting thing with Lego Ideas, it's actually a way of solving what we call the idea tyranny. At Lego, we get about 20,000 unsolicited ideas every year, and that goes in through our call center, and that means in the duration of when we're doing this interview, there might even come another idea. The problem with ideas is not whether they're good or bad, but it's actually how to sort them. And when you get the scale of ideas, you need a way and a mechanism to actually do it. And that's what we do with Lego Ideas. So it's actually a way of pushing the heavy lifting back to the crowd, letting the crowd verify if it's a good idea, and then we can do what we're really good at, the business model, the production, and the distribution. So that's an interesting thing. That was number one. That was like, letting these people and tapping into what they do. The second thing was that I found out that our consumers were amazingly creative and did a lot of content. So the second thing we did was find a way to amplify what they do. Because as I've found out many times and learned from many lessons, it's a lot more authentic and a lot more interesting what a consumer says about your product than what you as a marketeer might say. So that's where we created a program that's called Rebrick, where we amplify user-generated content around the web. That's kind of the two main big things that we've done. I've also participated in the Lego Mindstorms co-creation, where we had 12 users helping us develop the Lego robotics system in the next generation called EV3 that was launched in January 2013. What would the first step be to succeed in the co-creation strategy? I think the first thing to do is find a proper challenge to work with your consumers on. That's the first thing. But then you really need to spend a lot of time setting up the internal mechanisms to make these things happen. Remember, when you co-create, you don't always know what the outcome is, and you can't tell a consumer that's not what we want, go back and do something else. So you need to be very good up front with setting the expectation, managing the expectations, and setting the frames and the framework for doing these things. I would argue that a really key lesson for me was to make this a very narrow thing to do, so you have a small target that consumers need to hit with co-creation. A lot of it can be done on digital platforms, but remember, the digital platform is not enough by itself. Everybody thinks, all right, we'll do a co-creation or crowdsourcing platform, but maybe, you need to do it differently. You need to start with the internal processes, your culture, and your company, to actually be able to do this. So some good advice to a company who's trying to move into this area of co-creation. I would say Lego has some very specific prerequisites that are really strong. We have a very big community, a creative community, that are very capable and can do things. I think we have about 275,000 people organized, and in this group there's probably 10,000 PhDs, and they're really, really skilled. So if you are a new company that don't have this big consumer group, then probably I would go out and maybe team up with a crowdsourcing platform, try and do it. If it's content, I would go try a company like Tongle or a company like MoFilm. If it's design challenges, it could be Ica, it could be 99 Designs or Javoto. There's a lot of these companies that can help you because they have already a community and they have a process for it. So if you work with these companies, the key thing for you is to go out and try and figure out how you actually internalize the things you get. Because remember, when you go to a usual agency, you get something very specific. They do after you specifications, and they will jump through hoops to make it work. And when you engage with a crowd, it's a little bit different, and that's why sometimes working with these companies can give you an advantage. And that's a way of tiptoeing in. Don't start with a big thing first. Stuff like co-creation, working co-creation, is not like launching a rocket where you just like light the fuse and you sit back and wait till it takes off. It's much more like competitive sailing. And so talk to your social media people. There's a lot of lessons to be learned from there.
So does co-creation matter? Can it make money? Is it interesting? I would say yes. I think the first thing you need to do when tipping into co-creation, there are several reasons to do it. It can be a marketing activity, it can be consumer engagement activity, but I really think a lot of consumers will not care if it's not really that interesting and if it's not something that makes sense for the company. The things we do at Lego always have to make sense business-wise, or else we just don't do them. It needs to be a win for the company or as well as for the consumers. And if it's just seen as a marketing stunt, then it might not be that effective. Is co-creation going to take over the whole business and change everything? Not right now, and it's not like it has changed our perception of ourselves. And I would say that argument is kind of probably where we are as a company. And as I like to say, we have these very, very engaged consumers that are very smart, and we're actually just trying to keep up to their expectations at this moment. So a message to an older CEO who are interested in this, I think the first thing you need to do is go out, meet your consumers, and also respect them and see their potential.